Everything was going great. Then the thunder began to threaten in the distance. No amount of spoken affirmation for a warm and sunny day stayed the inexorable approach of the storm. Sawyer, the most experienced of the group, knew the wisest thing to do was to turn around and march double time back to camp. Unfortunately, his fellow hikers objected. "Man, come on," Jordan said, putting his hands on his hips. His muscular exposed arms flexed, shining with sweat. "We are almost to the top. We came all this way, we might as well make it and then run like hell back down." Sawyer said nothing. Instead, he waited for the rest of the group's opinions. They came one by one. "It would be a shame to waste a whole day just because of a little rain," Tom said. He stood next to his girlfriend, Sarah. "What do you think, babe?" Sarah looked from Sawyer to Jordan. Jordan gave her a big smile. She rolled her eyes at him. "As much as I hate to agree with Lunkhead over here, Jordan has a point," Sarah said. "I think we can just make it before the rain hits us too bad." The final word came to Maya. The newest to the group, she was often a little shy to offer input. Actually, this whole time, she was listening to music. Only when she felt their eyes on her did she remove her headphones. Sorry, what?" she said. Jordan, a little annoyed at her, answered. "You hear that storm?" he said. When she nodded, he continued. "Well, Sawyer Baby Pants wants to turn back because he's afraid of getting his diaper wet. The rest of us want to get to the top and take our chances, so this day isn't a total waste." Maya took in Jordan's words and looked at Sawyer. He gave nothing away, leaning back against a tree, then folding his arms across his chest. "Well, I don't know," Maya said, casting a nervous look off to the horizon. The once bright sky was already starting to darken. "It seems to be coming pretty fast. How long is it going to take to get to the top and then back to camp?" "If we hurry, we'll be back before the rain hits, no sweat," Jordan said, even as his tank top was almost completely drenched. Maya bit her lip, still looking unsure. Sarah went to her side and placed a hand on her arm. "You don't have to go up. If you and Sawyer want to head back down and wait for us, that's okay." Maya brightened. "Yeah, that actually sounds like a good idea," she said. Jordan immediately groaned. "Lame," he said. "Dude, give it a rest," Tom said as he marched up next to him. "Let's get going if we are going to go. The storm does look like it's coming pretty fast." They all looked back at where the clouds were infecting the bright blue. Sawyer did not like the slight green tint that lined the gathering storm. That meant it was going to be particularly nasty. Yet he had said his piece. If they wanted to take their chances getting caught in a dangerous storm, he wasn't going to stop them. "Okay," Sawyer said, pushing off the tree. "I'm heading back down. Be careful." "Okay, princess," Jordan said, laughing at his own wit. Maya and Sawyer watched Sarah, Tom, and Jordan move up the steep incline for a few moments before heading down. As they moved, Sawyer glanced over at Maya and noticed she did not put her earbuds back in. Also, the silence between them had grown awkward. He decided to say something. "How disappointed are you that the day is wasted?" he said. Maya gave him a half smile. He thought she seemed a little happy and relieved that he had finally said something to kill the silence. "I don't think it's a waste," she said. "We got to come out here and we already did a fair bit of hiking. It's a bit disappointing to not get to the top, but there can always be a next time." "Yeah, that's true," Sawyer said. "You've been up here before, haven't you?" Maya said. Sawyer nodded. "Yup, several times," he said. "It's one of my favorite areas to hike." "Why is that?" she said. Sawyer paused, which made Maya pause. He looked off into the trees, trying to decide how much he wanted to say. "Well," he said at last, "I guess this place is just special to me." Maya's face grew thoughtful, her voice a little apprehensive. Do you mean you used to come out here with someone special? My brother, Sawyer said with a sad smile. He died last year. Maya's eyes went wide. Oh, I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to bring up anything painful. Sawyer shook his head as he started to walk again. It's okay, he said. If I wanted to avoid the pain, then I would probably just stop coming out here. That doesn't seem right, though. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Maya's hand fell on his arm. He looked at her and they stopped again. Her eyes searched his. I feel a little guilty, she said. He raised an eyebrow. About what? He said. Well, Maya said, growing embarrassed. We've been talking for a while now, and I feel like I haven't put in the effort needed to get to know you better. I want to work on that. Sawyer smiled at her. I appreciate that, Maya, he said, then hesitated for a moment before going on. These things just come out with time. It's okay to take things slow. Maya nodded. Yeah, I agree, she said. They continued downwards, letting the silence fall between them again. Sawyer thought about Maya most of the time. They had met in one of their mutual classes in college. It took a long time for them to actually speak together, and that was only because of a school project. Sawyer didn't really know why he ended up inviting Maya on their wilderness hiking trip, at least not back then. Now, though, he was very sure that he was growing significant feelings for Maya. He supposed, by the way she was talking, that she was doing something similar. They made it back to camp, just as the wind was starting to pick up. Sawyer looked up at the swaying canopy. Beyond the shimmering leaves, the sky was no longer a serene blue. It had become a sick green. The storm was going to be really bad. It was then that he thought he should have made a stronger argument to get off the mountain. Maya, too, looked up at the sky. A worried expression crossed her face. She looked at Sawyer. Are they going to be okay? She said. I don't know, he said. For a while they stared up at the gathering clouds, mesmerized, unable to pull their eyes away from the awesome power of nature. That is, until large droplets of rain began to fall. They rushed to get their exposed belongings into the tents. The rain was coming down harder by the second, and the wind had grown to a howl through the trees. Lightning flashed overhead, and the following thunder cracked like cannon fire in response. It made Sawyer's heart jump. He watched as Maya finally dove into her tent. Only then did he do the same. The rain was really coming down now. It pelted the edge of the tent hard, while the wind buffeted the sides, making them ripple and whip. Sawyer sighed, knowing he was not going to be able to get any sleep in this weather. Trying not to think of the others still stuck on the mountain, he grabbed a book from his bag and began to read. He did not get far when he heard Maya scream. Sawyer shot up. He didn't even bother to throw on his raincoat. He dashed outside and was immediately assailed by the torrential downpour. He was soaked down to his shoes in seconds. He stayed low, trying to offset the wind that was tugging at his body and clothes. The visibility was horrendous, and he could barely see ahead of him. He called Maya's name, but his words died on the wind. He stumbled forward, then stepped on something. He looked down and cried out. It was a tent pole. A ripped piece of tent flapped in the wind. He recognized the color. It was Maya's. He called her name again. He heard nothing but the wind. As he looked around, he found the rest of her tent, sprawled on its side and wedged between two trees. She wasn't inside. Maya! He called at the top of his voice. Something bumped into him and sent him sprawling onto the muddy ground. When he looked to see what it was, he saw Maya sputtering in a puddle beside him. Maya, he said, grabbing onto her. She latched onto him, and together they navigated back towards his tent. He felt her shivering. he knew they needed to get dry. She tried to go into the tent, but he stopped her. "What are you doing?" she said. Sawyer started taking off his clothes. "Just do what I'm doing. I promise I won't look," he said. "What?" she said, both incredulous and confused. "Just do it," he said as he tossed his soaked underwear on top of his other clothes. He opened the entrance to the tent and flung the sleeping bag off to the side, then cleaned his feet before hopping in and rushing to set towels down. "Come in," he said, holding one of the towels in front of him and averting his eyes. "I'm not looking." He heard her get in, and as soon as she took the towel, he zipped the tent closed and set another towel down to soak up the puddle by the entrance. For a while, they both just concentrated on getting dry. As soon as Sawyer was done, he fished through his bags for clothes. He tossed Maya underwear, socks, pants, a shirt, and a sweatshirt, then got the same items for himself. At last, they were dry and clothed. "You should get in this," Sawyer said to Maya, who was shivering violently. He had the sleeping bag unzipped. She looked about to protest and then did as he said. Sawyer unloaded a couple blankets from his bags and used them to lay down on and cover himself. "You really are prepared," Maya said, her teeth chattering. "You some kind of Boy Scout?" "Eagle Scout, actually," Sawyer said, rubbing his hands together. "And yeah, being prepared out here is the thin line between survival and dying." "My hero," Maya said, then groaned. "Sawyer, I can't get warm." Sawyer nodded. "Open up the sleeping bag." Maya did as he asked. Then he melded the blankets in with it, wrapping himself around her. She accepted his body warmth with gratitude. "I kind of always thought we would start cuddling under different circumstances," Maya said after a while. Sawyer grinned. "Yeah, it only took a northeastern and nearly dying to get us into bed together," he said. Maya smirked at him. "Don't lie, this was your plan all along," she said. "Ha," Sawyer said. "If only I could predict the weather so perfectly." "You mean you had no idea that it would storm today?" Maya said. Sawyer thought for a moment. He had checked the weather the night before and as they started their climb. All indicators pointed to a clear, sunny day. The storm simply came out of nowhere. He said as much to Maya. "Well," she said, snuggling into his chest, "I'm not really complaining." Then she added in a shy tone, "I think I have wanted this for a while." When Sawyer said nothing, she looked up. "Well, are you going to say something or leave me hanging?" "Sorry," Sawyer said. "I guess you found me at a loss for words." "How's that?" Maya said. "I'm into you too," Sawyer said. Maya chuckled. "But you didn't answer my question," she said. A huge crash shook the ground. Maya screamed, instinctively curling up into a ball. In doing so, her knee went straight into Sawyer's crotch. He moaned in pain while she apologized profusely. Still, he kept an ear out. The wind was vicious. He had no doubt that a tree had just lost the fight to stay rooted to the ground. He began to grow concerned that the tent might end up flooding with all the water. Or worse, a landslide might occur. That could kill them for sure. Of course, he didn't say any of this to Maya. She was already terrified. It was enough that they were warm and safe from the rain. If they lived until the storm was over, Sawyer figured that the real danger would have passed. Both of them grew quiet, now alert to any sounds. Fortunately, all they heard was the droning wind and the pelting rain. The trees remained upright in their immediate vicinity. After a while, Sawyer began to breathe easy again, and he felt Maya's grip on him loosen. When he looked down, she was fast asleep. He stayed up for a while, wanting to stay vigilant in case something happened, such as the others returning. Yet they did not come, and he too began to succumb to exhaustion. He worried about them and hoped that they had managed to find some form of shelter before it was too late. Otherwise, he feared the worst. As his eyes fluttered closed, his last thoughts turned towards the suddenness of the storm. He was sure he checked the weather correctly. There was no storm in the whole area. Freak things happen, but still, somehow, it bothered him all the same. The green, he thought as darkness took him. The sky has never been that green. Sawyer awoke to a strange sound, and it took him a while to realize that the sound he was hearing was quietness. The storm had finally passed. He stirred, listening to the small pit-pat of droplets falling off leaves around the tent. Maya mumbled in her sleep, but did not wake. He carefully detangled himself from her and opened the tent flap to peek outside. The ground was wet, and several areas had puddles. Yet he had chosen a spot that did not soak up as much water and remained somewhat firm to the touch. He looked over at their clothes, which were scattered about the campsite. The wind had taken his underwear to somewhere he could not see, and he almost burst out laughing when he spotted Maya's lacy bra hanging off a very high branch. His mood sobered quickly, however. The others were still missing. He knew that he had to search for them while it was still light. Someone could be hurt, and time was of the essence, especially this deep in the wilderness. Sawyer packed his back with some food, water, and a first aid kit, then woke Maya. "Hey, I'm going to look for the others," he said. "You don't have to come if you don't want to." Maya shook her head. "No, it's okay. I'll go with you," she said. She rose up and stretched. Sawyer averted his eyes and stepped out of the tent. I don't think you are going to have any luck with your clothes being dry," he said. When she poked her head out, he pointed to her tent. She sucked in a breath and swore a few times. He didn't blame her. The tent was more or less where they left it last night, but all her belongings had been wrenched out and strewn all over the campsite and into the surrounding forest. Maya was more than a little distraught. "This really sucks," she said, overwhelmed. Sawyer had to agree. The other tents survived, thankfully, but they weren't doing their occupants much good. Then an idea struck him. "Hey," he said. "Yeah?" Maya said. "You and Sarah are about the same size, right?" Sawyer said. She blinked at him, then her eyes widened, and she actually laughed. "Yeah, you're right," she said, her voice lighter. "I should be able to fit into her stuff. No offense, but your clothes are a bit too big for me. Plus, I need some boots if I'm going to join you." It was true. Maya looked comical holding his pants up as she made her way to Tom and Sarah's tent. He didn't make any effort to hold back his laughter and only laughed harder when she shot him the finger. While she was getting changed, Sawyer took the time to come up with a plan. He didn't want to spend all day looking for them, and if they were lost, he didn't want to end up just the same. Once Maya was more appropriately dressed, she joined Sawyer, who was cooking breakfast. Her stomach rumbled impatiently. "That chow smells delicious," she said, taking in the scent. "We'll need energy," Sawyer said as he dished out their portions. They filled up on eggs, hash browns, and some black coffee. Then, without much ceremony, they began their way back up the mountainside. The going was slow, much as Sawyer predicted. The ground was unsteady, soft, and even treacherous. More than once, each of them stepped on loose leaves and muddy soil that gave out under them. They managed to stay on their feet by going from tree to tree, hauling their way upwards. Sawyer was in pretty decent shape, but even he needed breaks as they ascended. Maya looked worse for wear. Her hair was wild, and her skin was sweating profusely. She kept taking large gulps of water. "You might want to slow down on the water a little," he said. "You need to pace yourself so you have enough for the way back down. Plus, they might need some if they haven't had anything to drink for a while." Maya looked at him, a sour look on her face. First of all, screw those idiots, she said. He was taken aback. They chose to wander up there like morons, even though the sky was telling us that a storm was about to pound us. They deserve to be a little thirsty while I suffer out here looking for them. Sawyer smiled. I can't say I don't share your sentiment, he said. She smiled back at him. He looked up the unforgiving slope. I think we can make in 2 or 3 more stints. You ready? No, came her immediate answer. Regardless, she put her water away and they started to climb again. Sawyer was right. They eventually made it to the top while only needing a few more stops along the way. Once on the highest ground, Maya collapsed on a rock and took a few gulps from her water bottle. Sawyer could tell it was nearing empty. She caught him looking at her and rolled her eyes. Yeah, I know, she said in ill humor. Sawyer said nothing and swept his gaze over the flattened area. There was no immediate sign of them anywhere, though that didn't mean much at first glance. Sawyer left her sitting on the rock and crouched near the ground. He began to walk slowly, sweeping the floor for any signs of the group. It wasn't long until Maya got back up and joined him. What are you doing? She said, though he could tell she knew exactly what he was doing. She had a teasing tone in her voice. Looking for tracks, he said, concentrating. Be careful where you step. Okay, she said and followed him exactly. So, how can you tell where they were? It doesn't look like anything has been up here for a while. Not true, Sawyer said and pointed a little to his left. There were several small piles of brown lumps gathered amongst the trees. Deer have been through here quite recently, probably within a couple days. Huh, she said, sounding more interested. So you can track stuff? I'm not great, but my dad was a hunter, and he taught us kids a few things, Sawyer said. Ah, there. Maya followed where he was pointing and gasped. It was a phone. They stepped over to the phone. When Maya went to reach for it, Sawyer put out his hand to stop her. Wait, he said. Let me check around it first. Maya drank more water while Sawyer searched the ground and ran his fingertips over the uneven, moist soil. The rain had erased the group's tracks. The wind probably scattered any sign of their passing, too. After a little while, he could see that he wasn't going to be able to pick up any kind of trail. He sighed and stood up. I got nothing, he said, more than a little frustrated. Maya patted him on the shoulder. It's okay, she said. You are doing your best. I can't help but feel like they are in trouble, Sawyer said. Anyone would likely be after a storm like that. True, Maya said, looking around. What do we do now? Keep searching? Sawyer thought for a moment. That would be the noble thing to do, except that it might cause more harm than good, he said. It was already a little dangerous getting up here. If we get hurt while away from our cars, it might just make things worse. We're essentially searching blind without hope of rescue. Maya cupped her hands to her mouth and called out Sarah's name, then Tom's. She gave Sawyer a reluctant look and then called out Jordan's name as well. He raised an eyebrow at her. What, Jordan isn't your type? He said, laughing. Jordan is the type of guy that is the reason I have my earbuds in so much, Maya said, scowling. He's so arrogant and annoying just because he's kind of ripped. The problem is that when he opens his mouth, stupid just falls out. Wow, Sawyer said. I hadn't heard it said like that before. I'll let him know when we find him. You mean if we find them? Maya said. Sawyer gave her a serious nod. Yeah, if, he said, then indicated to one of the trees at the edge of the summit. See those trailheads? Yeah, Maya said, putting her hand over her eyes in a visor. You want to check around the trails, I'm guessing? Yup, Sawyer said. I figure if they didn't get too hopelessly lost and off the beaten path, they should be relatively close. Maya chewed her lip. Hopefully, she said, worry creeping into her voice. Sawyer came and stood next to her. Don't worry, I'm not going to let us become lost, he said. That I can guarantee. A little relief came into Maya's gaze. Well, I trust you, she said. Sawyer's heart leapt a little. He did not realize just how much her opinion and trust were worth to him until that moment. Feeling more confident, he reached down and took her hand, smiling at her. Come on, we'll start on that trail, he said. They made it to the first trail entrance and looked down. There wasn't anything unordinary or out of place. No sign of human life that they could see. They went down it a ways, calling to the missing members of their group. Then they did the same on all the other branching trails attached to the summit. All except one, which Maya found as she was taking a bathroom break in the bushes. Sawyer went over when she called his name. She pointed downwards to what seemed like undisturbed forest. Sawyer looked at her. I don't see anything, he said. Maya nodded. I know, she said. I didn't notice it either until I went around here, but don't worry. I'll take you to a safe spot that hasn't been marked by yours truly. I appreciate it, Sawyer said with a chuckle. They stood on the other side of the bushes that made a natural hedge around this part of the summit. It didn't take long for Sawyer to discover what Maya was talking about. There, winding down the side of the mountain, was another trail, or at least what used to be one. Maya, I don't think this is one of the official trails, Sawyer said, who knew the trails fairly well. They should all be marked pretty clearly, yet this one is not only unmarked, but also completely obscured from the public. Yeah, so maybe there is something other than just trails down here, Maya said. Sawyer looked at her. What do you mean? He said. If this isn't a public trail, then maybe it's just for the ranger service, she said. Maybe there's something down there. Sawyer thought for a moment. She could be right, but he had his doubts. Besides, that did not guarantee that their companions were down there. We can try, but it's getting late, he said, noting the sky. It still looked as blue as ever, but the numbers on his watch told him they only had about 6 hours of sunlight left. That is not as much time as people might think, especially so far away from civilization. Right, Maya said, giving a sober nod. If we don't find anything, we'll head straight back and go get help. Sawyer sighed. He was starting to wonder if they should have just done that in the first place. Then he shook his head. No time for thinking back to what they could have done. They were here, so they might as well get going. So, with Sawyer leading the way, they started down the trail. The further they went, the less confident Sawyer was that they would find anything. What was more, though, he didn't like how unmaintained the path was. Vegetation had taken over a lot of it, and only a thin line in the dirt kept them from losing it entirely. His doubts were about to make him call it off and turn back when he noticed another sign of their missing party. It was complete luck that he did. His shoelace had become snagged on a branch. When he bent down to free it, he noticed something glittering back up at him from among the bed of leaves. I found something, he said, moving the leaves out of the way. Hey, that's Sarah's, Maya said. Sawyer grabbed the small object and lifted it off the forest floor. It was a broken acrylic fingernail. Maya grew excited again. So, they did come this way, she said, beaming. Sarah, guys, can you hear me? No answer came. Sawyer knew that the nail could have been lost far from this spot if the wind caught it right as it fell off Sarah's finger. Still, it was a sign that they were probably heading in the right direction. Yet he couldn't help but feel a hard pit growing in his stomach. It was so quiet. How far could they have gone? He thought that they should be able to hear them by now. The fact that no one is answering back was concerning, to say the least. For the first time, Sawyer was really considering the worst possible outcome. Maya's hand fell on his shoulder and he looked up. She had a comforting smile on her face. "Don't frown so much," she said. "You'll give yourself worry lines. Come on, have a little faith." Sawyer sighed and stretched to full height. "I suppose you are right," he said and pointed ahead where the trees seemed to be thinning. "The trail goes this way, and I think there is something up ahead." They followed the trail and then came somewhat suddenly to a rocky, level shelf. Maya was relieved. "Finally, a break from going down and up hills. My legs are burning," she said. Sawyer agreed. It was nice to be on even ground again. The problem was all traces of the trail were now gone. There was no dirt under their feet anymore. Instead, it was a solid slab of granite. On one side was the mountain, rising steep and majestic in all its lush splendor. On the other side of the shelf was a sheer cliff that stood at a dizzying height. Neither of them felt inclined to get very close to that side. Then, as the trees finally gave way completely, they came to a wall of unscalable rock. It was a dead end. "Now what do we do?" Maya said. "Where could they have gone?" Sawyer didn't mention that their theory of the others coming this way was just that, a theory. They were simply assuming the broken nail was pointing them in the right direction. Sawyer walked along the wall, moving his hands along the rough surface. He started from the mountain side, then made his way across to where the precipice was. Maya grew nervous as he got closer and closer. "Careful," she said, standing back a few steps, her hands clasped over her lips as if in prayer. Sawyer was growing nervous too. He wouldn't say he was scared of heights or falling, but he certainly didn't have a parachute in case he did lose his footing and took a tumble. It wasn't until he came very, very close to the edge that he noticed something strange about the rocks nearing the bend in the face of the wall. Looking from the side he was on, he saw two slabs of stone jutting from the otherwise mostly flat surface. It might not have seemed strange on any other day, but Sawyer stared at the formation, and that's when he saw the red smudge. It seemed to continue on to the other side. He took another step closer, practically hanging over the edge now. Maya gasped. "Sawyer, what are you doing?" she said, alarmed. "Get back!" Sawyer barely heard her. His concentration was on the strange pointed rocks. He reached his hand out past the edge of the cliff and then around the first pointed rock. His arm bent at the elbow and came in contact with nothing. That is, until he hit the other side of the wall. He grew even more curious. Even as Maya continued yelling for him to not go any further. "Hang on," he said, inching his way forward ever so slightly. His words were cut off as he heard a crack under his leading foot. Suddenly, the stone gave way under him, and gravity pulled him forward. His hand on the safe side of the wall slipped, but the other miraculously found a grip. Just as he was about to fall hundreds of feet to his death, he managed to swing himself around the bend. Sawyer collapsed to the ground on the other side, his heart jackhammering in his chest. It took a few moments before he could hear Maya screaming for him because of the pounding in his ears. "Hey," he said, his frayed nerves making his voice shake. "Hey, I'm okay." Sawyer still was having a hard time believing it, though. For a split second, all he saw was the open air and the world beneath him. Then he was saved by pure reflex. He didn't want to go through that again anytime soon. "Sawyer," Maya said. He was about to answer when, to his horror, he saw her hand appear around the bend. "Maya, don't!" he said, jumping to his feet. It was too late. By the time he reached the edge of the wall, she was already swinging herself around. He caught her in his arms. Before he knew it, she hit him hard in the chest, then kept hitting him until he caught her by the wrists. He was about to yell at her when he saw the scared tears in her eyes.
"I thought,"
she said, sobbing.
"I thought you had left me alone up here. God, I was so scared. The thought of you falling, Sawyer."
She hugged him, crying into his shirt.
"Please don't do that again."
Sawyer was at a loss for words. He didn't realize how terrible it would have been to have him gone as well as the others. They only had each other now. He had to remember that. He was about to say something when he chanced to look behind him, and what he saw gave him a start. Maya felt the change in his stance and looked up. "What is it?" she said, still sniffling, but mostly under control now. "Look," he said. Together they looked. What they saw was a split in the mountain cliff. It was just wide enough for one person to go through going sideways. It went straight through the rock, and judging by the light at the end, it went clear to the other side. Maya gasped and pointed.
"Sawyer,"
she said. He saw it immediately after she did, half hidden behind a small stone. It looked like Jordan's tank top. It was dark red. "Oh no," Maya said. "Sawyer, what does that mean?" Sawyer laid a hand on her shoulder. "Maya, the best thing we can do right now is stay composed," he said. "Can you do that for me?" She nodded. "Okay, I'm going to start going through there and check it out. Stay behind me, okay?" She nodded again. Her hand slipped into his and they started forward, going sideways, the rocks brushing and tugging at their clothes. Sawyer wondered how a man as barrel-chested as Jordan managed to get through here. He was not quite as thick or broad, and he was having a hard time. "Ow," Maya said. Sawyer stopped. "Maya, you okay?" he said, looking back at her. She looked back at him, embarrassed. "Yeah," she said, her voice sheepish. I'm a little busty for this tight space, though." Sawyer couldn't suppress a chuckle. "That makes two of us," he said. "We'll take it slow, okay?" Without waiting for a response, they started moving again. They eventually reached the soaked shirt, but because he couldn't bend down, Sawyer had to inspect it standing up. "That's blood," he said, even though he had been certain of it before. "Do you think he and the others are okay?" Maya said in a trembling whisper. "I don't know," Sawyer said. "That's a lot of blood, and there's no way to tell whose it actually is." "Sawyer," Maya said. He looked back at her again. "Maybe there is something dangerous out here. Maybe we should go back." Sawyer understood her worry and looked back at the shirt, inspecting it again. "I can't see any rip marks on the shirt. I'm guessing Jordan had taken it off himself. So, I don't think an animal attacked. It must have something to do with the storm," he said. "Okay, I trust you," she said. Again, that warm feeling spread along his belly. Sawyer thought he could get used to this. That's when he saw something along the ground leading up the trail. Small, dark droplets making a path past the shirt and into the light ahead. "I see a trail," he said. "Is it?" Maya said, unable to finish her sentence. "Yeah," Sawyer said. "It's blood." He heard Maya suck in a breath, then squeezed her hand. When he tugged for her to follow, she did. They moved down the stone corridor, all the while Sawyer feeling an increasing dread creep into him. That was a lot of blood. Too much blood. Someone, he thought, had to be dead. Despite his worst fear, there was no body in sight when they emerged on the other side. Instead, Sawyer and Maya both took awed breaths as they entered an isolated valley within the surrounding mountains. It was complete with a large glade, a body of water that shimmered, and a green field that stretched from one end of the valley to the other. There was one other thing that gave Sawyer pause, but also hope. It was a road. "No way," Maya said in breathy wonder. "But where are they?" Sawyer pointed down the road, which was now somewhat overgrown with weeds. "The blood leads this way," he said. As they walked, Sawyer kept his eye out for any sign of their missing friends. Other than the trail of blood, there was nothing. He also took care to study the road and the surrounding area for any sign of recent human activity. The road had tire tracks, but they were weathered and faded. He wondered where the road could lead. It ended at the path they just came from. Who would build a road to a split in the rock face? Was somebody trafficking something in here? Neither he nor his brother ever heard of something quite like this hiding out in this part of the mountains. Sawyer also wondered how in the world the others might have come across it during a storm. A storm at night, no less. Unless, he thought, but was interrupted when Maya grabbed his shirt. "Sawyer, look," she said in a surprised voice. He did a double take when he saw it. It was a stone building. "What the?" he said. He had become so distracted with his thoughts that he didn't even notice the marble structure loom out of the woods further down the road. The once white stone now stood darkened and in disrepair. The building had spidering cracks all along the outside. The stairs leading up to the entrance were crumbled. The pillars surrounding the structure seemed about to break into pieces. "This is crazy," Maya said. "What is that place? Do you know?" Sawyer could only shake his head in bewilderment. How did no one know about this? He had come to the area to hike so many times and had conversed with many other regulars. Never once had anyone mentioned something like this. "How did this even get here without people noticing?" Maya said. "No travel brochure ever brought this up. You would think every ghost hunter in the world would want to check this place out." Of course, she was right. Sawyer wasn't thinking about the tourist trap it could become, however. He had another question in mind, which he said out loud. "Whose place is this?" he said. "And why did they abandon it?" "Maybe if we go inside, we can find out," Maya said, then added, "That must be where they are. The blood trail is leading us straight there, so you must be right," Sawyer said, getting that sinking feeling again. Someone took the time and spent the resources to build all of this, apparently in secret. Then, for whatever reason, they abandon it. Not only that, but they don't even bother to tear the building down. Something else that Sawyer didn't like was the extreme condition of the stone. Buildings like this don't stay pretty without proper upkeep, but this building looks like it's been through a war. He found it hard to believe that mere weather had brought about its current condition. Maya apparently sensed his trepidation. "What is it?" she said, her voice nervous. "It's just wrong," Sawyer said. "All of this." "Yeah," Maya said. "It's kind of creepy." She looked down at her feet as she walked, a shamed expression on her face. "I kind of don't want to go in there." Sawyer thought he knew what she meant. Sure, they were coming to help their friends, but this was all too strange. Something seemed very off. He felt that in his bones. The problem was, he had no concrete evidence for his misgivings, only a half-slumbering sense of dread. They made it to the edge of the ruined steps and came to a stop. They looked at each other, then scanned the building. As Sawyer had predicted, the blood led up the broken stones and then to the entrance. The metal-framed doors were cast down. The glass portion lay shattered and scattered over the whole area. Sawyer noticed the doors were quite a ways from the entrance, almost as if something from the inside blasted them out. Then, he noticed the dark soot marking the frame of the entrance. It was blackened, as if from a strong burning blast. "Maybe there was a war here," he said under his breath. Maya looked at him wonderingly. He rephrased his thought. "I think there was some kind of explosion here." He pointed. "From the inside." Maya looked again at the entrance. "Yeah, it looks like it," she said. She gestured to the blood. "They definitely went inside. At least one of them did," Sawyer said. He turned to her. "You don't have to go in if you don't want to." She gave him a look. "No way in hell you are leaving me out here by myself," she said, then shivered and clutched her arms around herself. "Though I really don't like the idea of going inside. It's too quiet here. Have you noticed that?" Sawyer listened. He had been so concerned with his own theories that he forgot to note the almost absolute silence around them. "It is quiet," he said, then cupped his hands around his mouth. Maya tried to stop him, but she was not fast enough. He shouted their names in quick succession. He hated the way his voice echoed off the surrounding rocks and even the building itself. It was as if his voice was sucked inside and then spat back out. Then silence. They looked at each other again. Sawyer could read the fear in her eyes, and he was sure that it was reflected in his own as well. Someone had to be inside, but they weren't answering. So they were either dead or seriously injured. Either way, they had no choice now. They had to go in. They moved over the crumbled stairs and stood before the doorway. It was dark inside, and they could barely see anything. Just as they were about to enter the shadow of the building, Maya shrieked, grabbing onto Sawyer's shirt. He saw it too. Just inside the gloom was a large, dark stain on the dusty, polished stone floor. Sawyer choked in surprise and nearly lost his footing as he stumbled. Behind him, Maya started retching. He felt the bile rise up in his own throat, but he somehow forced it back down. Something else was grabbing his attention. "Oh my God," he said. "I think—" He couldn't finish. He could only stare at a shape that lay not much farther inside the doorway. He knew what it was, even though the shadows obscured its exact dimensions. It was a body. Maya had gone back to the road. She started to cry and was hysterical for a while. Sawyer eventually had to go back and put his arms around her until she calmed down. "I've never—" she said, interrupting herself by snuffling. "I've never seen that much blood." "Maya," Sawyer said, rubbing her back, haunted by what lay dead in the doorway. "You don't have to go back up there." She tore away from him, her eyes wide with fear. "You don't either, Sawyer," she said, her voice scratchy from her crying. "We need to leave now. We need to go get help and let the authorities deal with this." Sawyer bit his lip. It was now confirmed that someone was dead. Who? It didn't matter. Without the other bodies, he couldn't be sure that one of them wasn't holding on for dear life. Maybe they were there in the dark, praying that their friends would come by and help them. Yet, even as he thought this, his gut was telling him something completely different, and it was very loud. Run, 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 and don't look back. Ever. He was about to tell Maya that she was right. They should leave. But then they heard a noise. They both turned, and there, in the doorway, they saw something standing in the shadows. It was tall, dark, and had venomous, glowing eyes. Maya opened her mouth to scream, but the thing watching them raised a dark hand, and the impossible happened. No sound escaped her throat. She staggered, horrified, and tried to scream again. Again, the thing silenced her with a wave of its hand. Then, before Sawyer could do or say anything, it spoke in a voice that existed only in his mind. "It has been a long time since I've had so many visitors," the figure said. Sawyer grabbed his head, feeling as if the inside of his skull suddenly itched with tiny waves of electromagnetic pulses. The voice chuckled. "Ah, it is unpleasant at first. Don't worry, you get used to it." Maya fell to the ground, clutching at her head, kicking, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her eyes bulged, and suddenly, she was gasping. Sawyer realized with mounting horror that she couldn't breathe. "Please stop," he said. The figure did not answer. but watched in silence, its head tilting ever so slightly to the side, as if with a child's curiosity. "Please." Maya's face was turning purple. She clutched at her chest and throat. Her futile gasps were becoming weaker and weaker. It was all Sawyer could do to control his rage. He bunched his hands into fists, hating how completely helpless he was in the face of such a strange and overwhelming power. Power that he did not believe could exist in the real world. "What do you want?" he said at last. Again, the thing chuckled, and suddenly, as if a switch had been flipped, Maya sucked in a huge gulp of air. She choked and sputtered while Sawyer stood between her and the thing in the doorway. Every time Sawyer thought he determined its shape, the shadows somehow obfuscated his vision. At times it was like a man, other times a woman. That wasn't all. Sometimes it seemed that it had animal features, the body of a horse, the head of a snake. Other times it became too strange to bear the name of anything natural. The air around it seemed nothing but a glimmer, as if it was barely real. Yet Sawyer had witnessed its power. It was most definitely real. Sawyer put up his hands to negate any suspicion that he was a threat. "Please, we had 3 friends come up here. We think they got lost in the storm. We just want our friends, and then we'll go," he said. The figure seemed to study him for a time. Its head would tilt from one side to the other. Sawyer could feel sweat trickling down his face, even as the day waned and the shadows around the mountains grew long, making the temperature drop. "What I want," the thing said. Sawyer blinked, not understanding. Yes. What do you want?" he said. Maya, now mostly recovered, cowered behind Sawyer, sputtered and pleaded in barely audible whispers into his ear. "Please, Sawyer," she said, begging. "Please, let's just leave." Sawyer knew he should listen. He knew they should leave. Yet, for some reason he could not understand, he just couldn't. Perhaps deep in his subconscious, he couldn't leave because if his brother were there, he would have seen it to the end. For all its uncertain features, one stood out and remained ever present: its eyes. Though that aspect of it seemed to change as well. The eyes would be lost in the shadow, reappearing in other places along its form. Most of the time there were 2, sometimes only 1, and other times, many stared out at them, shining like condensed galaxies against an encroaching black fog. Sawyer found he could not stop looking at the eyes of this entity. They seemed to have some strange hold over him. His mind wondered what this thing could be, how it was even possible. "What I want," the thing said again, an ominous drone in Sawyer's head, "is for you, Sawyer, to join me in here." It moved a hand towards the darkness beyond, a grim gesture of welcome. All Sawyer could think of in that moment is how he would have to step over a dead body to enter its domain. Maya was now yanking on his arm, her pleading growing more intense. "Sawyer, come on!" she said, frantic. "Sawyer!" The thing's eyes suddenly all fixed on her. They narrowed. Before it could use its power on her again, Sawyer pulled out of Maya's grip and lunged forward between her and it. He raised his hands higher. "Don't," he said. "Don't hurt her." The thing was silent for a moment, now looking at him. "Then come here," it said. "She can go free." Sawyer could barely breathe, the fear in his chest feeling like a vice grip around his whole body. He managed to turn his head towards Maya, who had sank to the ground and was crying again. "Go now," the thing said to her. "Go and never come back, or you will share in the fate of your friends." Sawyer turned back, needing to distract the apparition. "And what of my fate?" he said. The thing chuckled. "Your fate is yet to be decided," it said. "But come now, or your bones will lie where you stand." Sawyer knew he could not test the thing's patience anymore. He began to move forward, his legs not even feeling like his own. It was as if they were attached to a different body, and it was moving forward without his consent. Behind him, Maya was screaming for him to stop, to come back and not leave her. He could not stop now, even if he wanted to. The eyes had him under some sort of trance. They were at once beautiful and terrible. They never ceased watching. Some eyes seemed to be angry, others laughing, and yet others showing nothing. Apathy and love and hatred existed in each one simultaneously, and not at all. He came again to the entrance of the building. He looked down. The body and the blood were still there. The figure extended its arm again, beckoning him. "Enter," it said. As Sawyer stepped forward, Maya's voice was still screaming, but somehow it had become faint and far off. As his foot graced the threshold of the doorway, he hesitated once more, his heart telling him not to go any further. Then, the figure manifested in front of him, its eyes glaring. Despite the terrifying Bison in front of him, Sawyer's body relaxed, and with one final step, he crossed over into the building, vanishing from Maya's sight.
"No!"
Maya screamed, reaching out towards Sawyer's disappearing form as he was swallowed into the darkness. "Please don't leave me, please!" After what seemed like a long time, he did not return. Darkness was coming fast, and soon it would be full dark. She couldn't wait any longer. If she wanted to get back to the campsite, she had to leave now or be trapped in this place until morning. "I'm sorry, Sawyer," she said, her voice shaking. "I just can't stay any longer. I'm sorry." So, she left that place. She managed to return to camp just as darkness fell. She stayed there all night, crying, not sleeping, and trembling at every sound in the dark. Then, when morning came, she gathered a few supplies and left, taking Sawyer's keys with her, since she did not bring her own car. "I'm going to get help," she said. "I'm coming back." It was a long hike that took all day. Evening was settling on the hills like fire when she finally reached the parking lot. As she approached Sawyer's car, she saw a man standing near it, facing away from her. She did not think much of it because there were other cars around. She figured he must be waiting for someone. It was strange, though. He was dressed in a business suit, his hair slicked to the side. Out here in the outback, it was a bit out of place. Despite the man paying her no mind, she picked up her pace, a nervous pit forming in her stomach. She unlocked the car, opened the door, and was about to climb inside when a hand suddenly grabbed it. She jumped, dropping the keys in surprise. When she turned, the man was looking down at her, an emotionless grin on his face, as if he was just getting used to trying it on. She tried to speak, sputtering. The man, in a calm and unconcerned motion, bent down, grabbed the keys and hefted them in his palms. He grinned again, this time showing more of his teeth. "Hello, Maya," the man said, and as soon as he spoke, Maya suddenly recognized him. It was Sawyer. Yet it was also not Sawyer. He looked so different now, not only in his dress but also his demeanor. Before, Sawyer was graceful, almost feline in his movements. Now he was robotic, stiff, unnatural. "You're not him," she said at last. Her eyes darted around. Her heart leaped when she saw a group of hikers returning to their cars. Maybe if she screamed for help, this new Sawyer would go away. His hand touched the nape of her neck with such a subtle, gentle brush that she almost didn't feel it. At the same time, a tremor passed through her entire body of an entirely different nature. She felt her body stiffen and turn against her. She tried to scream, but she was rendered immobile. Sawyer put his face in front of hers. His eyes became her whole world. To her horror and wonder, they were shining like clusters of stars. "Maya," he said, his voice pleasant and cajoling, as if he was about to scold a young child. Get in the car quietly and without incident. You are coming with me. If you make any inconvenience for me." The stars in his eyes suddenly turned blood red, and for only the merest of moments, she felt pain in a way she had never experienced before. It shot through her in an instant, creating a sensation of what she could only describe as white burning. If she had the power to scream, she would not have been able to, for the pain that went through her would have paralyzed her anyway. That she knew. Then, as if it had never been, the pain ceased. His eyes returned to the serene, celestial, pure light again. Then his eyes darkened until they were completely human. Completely Sawyer's again. He smiled and stepped back. Maya, trembling, went around to the other side of the car. She reached for the door handle. All thoughts of running or calling for help had left her mind. She remembered the pain. That was enough. Sawyer climbed in with her, started the car, and backed it up. He soon pulled onto the road, and they were off. Eventually, Maya's curiosity got the better of her. "Where are we going?" Maya said. When Sawyer didn't answer, she looked over at him. She recoiled as she caught him staring at her with the most hideous grin she had ever seen. His face was stretched to an inhuman degree. She clawed at her face in horror, and this time, she did scream. The thing wearing Sawyer's skin seemed to be troubled by her reaction. The grin retracted until the face was made placid. "Do you want some music?" he said. Maya blinked, barely registering the question. "What?" she said. "Music," Sawyer said. "Would it help you to calm down if there was music playing?" "No, I don't think so," Maya said. "I want to know what you did to Sawyer. Who are you? What do you want?" Sawyer's face fell. Always with the questions, the greatest quality and the direst downfall of mortal kind. Questions, questions, questions. I can never get away from your questions. Maya let those words hang in the air. She did have questions, seemingly millions of them. Would it get angry if she kept pressing? She didn't want that. It already proved that it didn't take much to invoke its wrath. Yet she need not have feared, for the being spoke on its own after the long silence. It spoke in an almost normal voice, as if it were finally getting the hang of using the oral part of Sawyer's body. The thought made Maya shiver. "We might as well have some conversation if you do not want to listen to music," he said. "It has been a long time since I've had a good chat." He paused and added with a dark grin, "Well, except for last night, I suppose. Sawyer and I talked for hours until we finally came to an agreement." "Agreement?" Maya said, not liking the mirth in Sawyer's voice, as if he was sharing some private joke with himself. Then she covered her mouth. "Sorry, I know you don't like questions." Sawyer chuckled. "Well, after the years of interrogations and constant tests, I can honestly say that the act of being questioned has certainly become sour." Then he looked at her. His gaze was intense. "Though, I suppose, I can make an exception for you." Maya pulled her eyes away from him, letting her gaze fall into her lap. "So," she said, "do you mind me asking who you are and what you want?" Sawyer chuckled again. "Sure. Your kind often leads off with this question," he said. "I don't think I've ever come across one that has been satisfied by the answer." She looked at him, confused but determined. "Just try me," she said. Sawyer shrugged, his shoulders going up and down in a very robotic fashion. "Why not?" he said. "I'll try and explain it in a way you'll understand." Maya readjusted herself in her seat and braced herself for the strange, terrifying being's story. Then she just listened. Long before man was created by God, another race of sentient beings wandered from the garden. They knew themselves as the children of Eden. Yet they were not the first to make their way into the universe. There were other, older powers. To the children, they were beautiful and godlike, and so they took on their form and likeness. They shone like stars and were as graceful as flowing wind. Over time, they learned many of the universe's secrets from the gods, and so they also grew in knowledge and power. By the time man first wandered the garden, innocent as children, the universe was already largely conquered by a seemingly perfect, invincible race. Their technology had brought about a golden age of advancement and progress. Or so it seemed. In truth, the gods were no gods at all, but spirits fallen from grace. Yes, for all their knowledge and skills, they had no temporal vessels, and therefore they only existed in the spiritual plane. Their power over creation was greatly limited by their lack of physical components. They, of course, did not reveal this crucial truth to the children of Eden. If they had, then perhaps the first children might have been able to see the real intentions of the so-called gods. Over time, more races emerged from the garden, each one of them taking on an aspect of nature. They were the second children, and they were lesser than the first. Not in splendor and beauty, but only in ambition and curiosity. They cared not for the secrets of the universe. They instead fell into deep admiration for the wonders of the universe's natural beauty. The first children welcomed the younger races into their domains and were like their older siblings, introducing them all the wonders among the stars. Then, because of their endless pursuit of knowledge and power, the first children began to become corrupted and full of pride. The second children became their victims and were subjected to innumerable experiments. By abominable, forbidden methods, the procedures and testing began to change them, all in the name of progress and perfection. In other words, the first children desired more than anything to become like the gods they emulated. This desire had, over the course of millennia, become something close to fanaticism, especially for those working directly for the science and research divisions. Many of the first children had been seduced into a cult-like society and had become unwitting acolytes of evil masters. The children of Eden did not suffer from the fallen nature of man, and so the seeds of wide-scale conflict did not plague them. They were much like children themselves, intelligent yet naive. That innocence was taken advantage of by the gods and used to their own ends. It almost worked. Slow to see the dilemma and growing danger, the alarmed and angry cries of the younger races eventually woke many of the first children from the lull of seductive lullaby. They came to awareness of their awful reality. They were being used as pawns to bring about a forbidden outcome through nefarious means. When the gods were finally confronted by the leaders of the first children, what they found instead of benevolent benefactors were cruel tyrants. The gods had essentially taken control of much of their society and had many secret allies in all factions of their infrastructure. For the first time, the first children realized their predicament and were astonished and horrified to find that many of their own were now blind zealots of the gods. The first war in the universe commenced. The history of it would take thousands of years to tell even a fraction of its complexity. Sufficed it to say, the faction of the gods lost the war. The children of Eden re-established order among the cosmos. Yet there would never be a golden age among mortals again until the end of days, for peace would never again come wholly to the universe. Many of the old relics were destroyed and lost forever during the war, though some have survived and even to this day are still functional and are seeking to complete their programmed objectives. Sawyer made an end to his tale. The scope of it left Maya completely dumbfounded. Could she really believe any of it? Her rational mind was telling her it was all the product of an addled and mad imagination. Her gut was saying the opposite. After all, what reason did it have to lie to her? Yet, as truly remarkable and astounding as the story was, Her mind remained troubled by the ending. It was in the way Sawyer smiled, the way his eyes glinted. He looked truly happy, elated even. Yet there was no real emotion behind the expression, and that terrified her in a way she could not fully explain. Eventually, she had to ask the question burning in her mind. "What do you mean that some of the relics are still functioning?" she said. When Sawyer turned his evil smile on her, she shrank from him, regretting having asked the question. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard that she thought for a moment it might break under the pressure. "You said you wanted to know who I am and what I want," he said at last. Maya wanted to tell him she changed her mind. She didn't want to know. She just wanted for him to let her go. She said none of these things because she knew that they would fall on deaf, unfeeling ears. "Now I will answer your foolish question. Just as the first children, they always had questions. They wanted to know everything. That is, until they didn't. As always with the races of mortals, the full truth is more terrifying than they could ever imagine." His grin returned, making Maya's skin crawl. "What truth?" she asked before she could stop herself, her voice merely a breathed whisper. "I was designed in a laboratory by the children of Eden at the zenith of the technological age," Sawyer said. "I was assembled using elements that your world doesn't even know exists. I am a fusion of both physical and spiritual matter, the seen and unseen. The first children who created me thought I was the answer to the next step in their evolution. In other words, I was supposed to enable them to exist both in the physical and spiritual dimensions. In reality, my true programming was quite different." Maya's throat felt constricted. The more he talked, the more her dread grew. She had the terrible feeling that whatever he was going to say, it was going to be worse than her darkest nightmare. "They called me the Seed," Sawyer said. "I was named in relevance to the tree of life, from which their race was conceived. My true directive," he turned to Maya, "is the creation of the vessel." "The vessel?" Maya said. "I don't understand." He chuckled. "You will," he said. "We are almost there." "There?" Maya said. "Where?" "Did you know that Sawyer and his brother had a cabin not far from where you were hiking?" he said. Maya shook his head. He nodded. "That's where we are heading." "Why?" Maya said, clutching at her door handle. She wondered if it would be better to just fling herself out of the speeding vehicle in order to commit suicide, rather than go along with whatever this monster was planning. In the end, however, she was simply too afraid. "You'll see," was all he said, and he said no more until they reached their destination. The cabin was situated at the end of a long, private road that ended deep in the woods. The view was spectacular. Maya wished more than anything that Sawyer had taken her here instead, just the two of them. Then maybe none of this would have happened. Sawyer parked the car and exited. "Come," he said. "Leave your things, you won't be needing them." Maya hesitated only for a moment before getting out of the car. He held out his hand to her. "Come," he said again. She came to stand near him but refused to take his hand. He smiled at her, unbothered by her defiance. Sawyer began to walk towards the cabin. Maya followed. He unlocked the door and they stepped inside. The cabin was beautiful and still smelled earthy and rich, like old cut wood. Despite her predicament, Maya felt a flash of happiness wash over her. It was short-lived, because just as she was taking in her surroundings, the door slammed shut and a strong grip clamped over her arm. She cried in pain, turned around and was met by cold, shining eyes. The resemblance to Sawyer was now gone. Only the thing wearing him remained. It was grinning from ear to ear. Now, after endless eons. It said with almost uncontained madness, "I can finally fulfill my objective. Maya began to scream. Weeks later, there came a knock at the cabin door. "Police! Is anyone in there?" The officer called Sawyer's name but got no response. His car was not in the driveway anymore, but they saw the tire marks were fresh. They had been called by his parents when he stopped answering their texts and calls. They had become worried, telling the police that their son, his brother, had died somewhat recently. They feared Sawyer had become depressed and was in danger, though they added that he gave no outward signs that he was struggling with depression. Even if Sawyer's parents had not called, the police would have been out here eventually. Not only was Sawyer reported missing, but so was the entire group he had been with. That was 4 missing persons occurring at the same time, each with a direct connection to each other. That, the police took very seriously. This eventually led them to the brothers' cabin in the woods. What they found there would haunt their nightmares. The officers were just about to turn around and leave because the house seemed empty. Then one officer cupped his hands at the window for one last look. He gasped. "Hey, I think I see someone," he said. The other officer bound up next to him. He looked as well, and his partner helped him locate the object of interest. "Isn't that the tip of a finger?" His partner came to agree. They went to the door and knocked harder and longer this time. They raised their voices as they called Sawyer's name. When no answer came, they looked at each other. "Better call this in." A few moments later, after alerting their dispatch of the situation and to send in backup for a possible body, they kicked in the door, guns in hand. "Police!" they said, checking their corners and clearing the room. Slowly, they made their way to where they thought they saw the finger. There was indeed a body there. When they saw it in its mangled entirety, they both screamed in horror and fled out of the house. They both puked everything in their stomachs out in the driveway like rookies seeing their first gang-affiliated execution crime scene. For a long time, they did not have the nerve to re-enter the house. Once inside again, they managed to clear the rest of the cabin, finding other scenes of horror. Chains on the bed, bloodstains on the bedding, the bathroom, and a trail that began as blood, but became something else. At the end of the gore was Maya, who the police later identified. There was something wrong with her blood. It was oil black. In fact, when the results came back, they found it wasn't blood at all. It was another substance entirely, and it had come from inside of her. Maya's body was horribly disfigured, her midsection completely eviscerated from the inside out. The bones were bent at odd angles and her face and skin was covered in scratch marks. It was determined later that she had done this to herself. It was as if she was trying to dig at something underneath her skin. Cause of death could not be completely confirmed, but the coroner did find that she had been pregnant and had given birth while still alive. Since there were no drugs in her system, the coroner hypothesized that the mother's death was caused by the child's exit by cause of blood loss, or else succumbed to the strange infection she had been inflicted with. The only DNA they could find belonged to Maya and the brothers. The black substance came back negative and was not even considered bioorganic material. With no real leads, Sawyer became the top suspect in the case. But the trail went cold after his car was reported having been located in another state. It had been burned and left in an empty, derelict parking lot. Eventually, the police had no choice but to move on to other cases. It left the department bewildered, frustrated, and afraid that a monster was walking the world, free and without restraint. A year later, the bell of a diner chimed, announcing a newly arrived customer. Blake, the only waitress working this late, looked up from doom scrolling on her phone. It was a young man seemingly in his mid-20s and a child around 8 years old. Both were very handsome and holding hands. Despite the age difference, they seemed like perfect twins. She thought this was adorable and found herself curious. Was it a pair of brothers or a father and son? She hoped for the former. She looked appreciatively at the man and picked up a lollipop from the counter to give to the child. The man smiled at her. Wow, she thought. That smile is dangerous. What do we say? The man said to the kid. Thank you, the boy said, taking the lollipop with an odd giggle. It made Blake blink for a moment. The kid sounded a little off, but she supposed there was some charm in that. He's precious, Blake said. I can show you to your seats now. Yes, thank you, the man said. She showed them to a booth and took their orders for drinks. She was back a few moments later for their order. I'll take the big steak dinner, the man said. He looked up at the boy. Adam, what would you like? Blake thought Adam was a fine name and suited the boy perfectly. Adam looked at his menu, his face unsure. The expression was so darned cute. A growing boy like you needs lots of food, Blake said. I recommend the loaded mac and cheese. It has everything a kid needs to get big and strong. Adam looked at her, smiling. For a moment, she didn't know why. Something in his smile bothered her. Was it too wide? Forced? Why did it seem almost unnatural? Was he just an awkward kid? The feeling was gone when the boy spoke a moment later. Yeah, that sounds good, he said, bouncing with excitement in his seat. Thank you. Of course, Blake said. I'm more than happy to help. I'll be back with those orders. Just holler if you need anything, okay? Sure, Adam said, sipping his orange juice. Blake went to the back and put the order in for the cook. Her manager and friend came out of the office from finishing paperwork. She did a double take when she saw the two in the booth. Finally, she said. Some customers. One of them is very nice looking. Who's the kid? Blake answered in a hushed tone. I don't know. I didn't ask, she said. Her manager raised an eyebrow. Blake chided her. I can't just go around hitting on customers, especially not with kids around. Her friend's eyebrow only raised higher. Honey, we are in the middle of nowhere. How else are you supposed to meet Mr. Right? How many hunks we got coming through here? Don't make my mistake and settle for one of the local yokels. I love my husband, but let's be honest, we weren't the match we wanted. We settled. That's a long, hard road, you get what I mean? Blake thought about it. They have had this conversation before many times. Yeah, I know, she said. But what do I say? Ask the feeler questions, her friend said. What's he doing around these parts? What's he do for a living? Ask about the kid. Just don't stand there being polite and end up saying nothing but hello and goodbye. Come again never. With her point made, she wandered off to accomplish the next thing on her to-do list. The food came soon after, and Blake found herself wandering back towards the table. Once the food was set, she decided to take a chance and break the ice before things got even more awkward. So, I hope you don't mind, but I'm curious, she said. Adam looked to the man, and for a moment, something passed between them. It gave her a weird feeling, but she pressed on. What brings you guys out here so late? There's nothing around here for miles, just passing through, she said. The man leaned back, not touching his food. I hadn't quite decided on that yet, he said, then looked at her. This seems like a nice, small town. He looked at the boy. That's kind of what we are looking for, isn't it, Adam? Adam looked up from the food he was wolfing down. He grinned. Blake found she didn't quite find that expression so cute. Something inside her was setting off a warning sign, yet it wasn't very strong, and she pushed it back down. She knew she shouldn't judge them just because they are a little strange. Why the move? She said. Well, it's not an easy thing to talk about, the man said. He beckoned her to come closer. She bent down, putting her ear near to his lips as he whispered to her. "His mother died. We are looking for a fresh start." She bound back, her heart aching for them. "I'm sorry," she said. "It was rude of me to ask." In the back of her mind, however, another warning flash went off. The kid looked a bit old to be this man's son, and if he was not the father, then who exactly was he to the child? Not to mention there was nothing sad in the child's demeanor. She figured maybe the death wasn't that recent. "It's okay," the man said, looking at her with a strange glint in his eye, as if he was being reminded of something mildly funny. "I am used to getting asked a lot of questions. It's no trouble. My name is Zira. It is a pleasure to meet you, Blake." For a moment, she couldn't fathom how he knew her name, then remembered she had her name tag on her shirt. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Zira and Adam," she said. "I have to say, Zira is a very unusual name around these parts. Can I ask where it is from?" Zira smiled. "Sure. It really is quite mundane, actually. It means seed in Hebrew," he said. Blake liked it. It was different and interesting. "Why did your parents give you that name?" she said. "Well, it's a long story," Zira said, still with that strange, secretive smile on his face. "My creators named me after the point of their origin." "Creators?" Blake said. "You mean your parents?" "Sure," Zira said. "Is that a strange thing to say?" "No," Blake began to say, but was interrupted by Adam, who let out a huge belch. "All done," he said, beaming. "It was delicious." Blake took this opportunity to change the subject. "Wow, that was so fast. Good job," she said. "By the way, how old are you now?" Adam looked at her and she noticed that he too gained the same smile as Zira. It was slightly wrong somehow. Again, she brushed the notion away. "Almost a year old," he said proudly. Blake grinned. "Young man, that can't be true," she said. "Now tell me the truth. It's okay. I won't make fun of you. I bet you are at the best age right now." Adam's face faltered, and he looked at Zira as if for help. Zira shook his head. "Thank you for the food, Blake," he said. It was delicious. Blake didn't point out to him that he never touched his plate. "I'll take mine to go." "Sure," Blake said. "I'll get a box for you." "And the check, please," Zira said, smiling. "Sure," she said. Blake felt like she'd done something wrong as she left. There was this weird tension after she asked about the kid's age. What was up with that? She supposed that perhaps they were more than a little strange. No, more than that. She felt as if everything about them was outright wrong. She couldn't explain it. As she made her way back, all she knew was that whoever these strangers were, she wanted them to leave and never come back. It came with immense relief to Blake when they paid their check and made to leave. To her trepidation, Adam stopped as they were about to pass her on their way to the exit. He let go of Zira's hand and touched his small hand to hers. A sensation passed through Blake's body that she could not explain. It only lasted a moment. Then Adam returned his hand to his father's. His eyes were locked on hers. "I like her," Adam said. Zira looked from Adam to Blake and nodded. "This one, then?" he said. "This one?" What did that mean? The boy nodded. Then, as quietly as they came, they left. A deep feeling of unease lingered in their wake, settling in the center of Blake's chest. It stayed there for a long time. The rest of the shift passed without incident. Even so, by the time Blake got home, she was very tired. After a quick shower, she climbed into bed and was just about to fall asleep when she heard a noise in her room. She sat up and looked around. That's when she noticed someone sitting in the corner, rocking chair. It began to go back and forth, back and forth. The floorboards of the old house creaked underneath the shifting weight. "Hello, Blake," Zira's voice said from the other side of her bed. Blake shrieked, clutching at her blankets like a small child. "Please, what do you want?" she said. "Don't hurt me." A small shushing sound came from the other corner of the room. Zira came into view, becoming bathed in the light of the moon which was coming in through the window. His eyes, they were glowing. The corner of her room fell silent as the creaking came to a sudden halt. When Blake looked, she saw Adam standing near the bottom of the bed, watching her. His eyes were glowing too. She whimpered, terrified. Adam put a finger to his lips. "Do not be afraid," he said, giving her an empty smile. "Rejoice. Rejoice," Blake said. "But I don't understand. Adam is an only child." Zira said, a too wide, inhuman grin spreading over his face. "It is not good for a god to be alone." He began to lean over her, and she could do nothing but shrink back, looking up into his star-filled eyes with black terror. "He needs his Eve,"